itself. Suddenly, it shifted ahead and hovered only 100 feet above their vehicle, causing Barney to have to stop in the middle of the road. It then shifted to an adjacent field. Barney got out of the car with his binoculars. He put a pistol into his pocket, and he looked up at this craft, and he could see, and this was full conscious memory. They never forgot about this. He could see non-human entities on board that craft looking back down at him. This frightened him terribly. Something started to drop out of the bottom of the craft. He was losing his ability to take self-initiated action. He was being told to stay in that field, to just keep looking, and that he would be okay. No harm would come to him. And this caused him to become more and more frightened. He eventually was able to break away, to run back to the car in a hysterical condition, telling my Aunt Betty that he felt they were about to be captured. As he entered the car, the craft shifted again from the field overhead and hovered above the car as they drove down the highway, traveling very rapidly. Betty rolled down the window and looked up, but she wasn't able to see the craft, the lights on the craft. In fact, she couldn't even see the stars, and that later led them to believe that the craft was probably just hovering right above the car at that point. Suddenly, there were a series of code-like beeping or buzzing sounds on the rear of the car, the trunk area of the car, and it caused this feeling of vibration to pass through the car and also through Betty's and Barney's bodies. And this vibrational kind of feeling caused them to become very sleepy. That was the last thing they remembered until they were 35 miles down the road, and they recalled seeing a fiery orb in the road. They recalled the second series of beeping or buzzing sounds that brought them back to full consciousness, and they started talking again. But for this 35-mile period, they had no recollection of traveling down this highway, no recollection of any discussion. And this is very, very strange because normally anyone who had this kind of experience would certainly want to discuss it. They traveled on to their house in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on the seacoast, and when they arrived, they realized that they were arrived sometime later than they had anticipated. Within the next few weeks, they discovered that it was a full 2 to 3 hours later than they should have, even allowing for those 3 stops that they made. There was also physical evidence that something strange had happened to them.
And then they did the hypnotherapy and just all kinds of stuff came up, right?
Well, yes. This was sometime later that they underwent hypnotherapy. The physical evidence was really beginning to bother them. Betty's dress, it was a perfectly fine dress that she had been wearing that night. It was in great condition when she put it on. When she arrived home, there was a 1-inch tear on one side at the top of the zipper, a 2-inch tear on the other side. The lining was torn out from waist to hemline. The hem was torn down on the right side, and there was no explanation for how this had happened to her. Barney's shoes. Barney was a meticulous dresser. The shoes that he was wearing were inexplicably scraped to the point that he was no longer able to wear them as dress shoes. They were relegated to the shoes that he wore when he was doing yard work. There were also shiny circles on the trunk of their vehicle, right in the area where they heard those beeping or buzzing sounds. And they responded to a compass that was placed over them. So the needle of the compass would spin and spin, whereas when it was placed on another area of the metal of the car, it would drop down. And this was very strange. I saw all of this evidence and I was able to observe what happened as the unfolding of the aftermath occurred in this event. They immediately found Pease Air Force Base. They also made a report to NICAP, the National Investigations Committee for Aerial Phenomena, and within a month, an investigator, Walter Webb, from that organization came and started the investigation of their case. Over time, Barney started to suffer physiological symptoms that would not recede with traditional medical treatment. He developed bleeding ulcers, high blood pressure, insomnia, all sorts of problems related to really post-traumatic stress disorder. And eventually, this was tied to the event that had happened to them in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And at the end of 1963, this is over 2 years after the event itself, he finally was referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist from Boston. He and Betty then spent the next 6 months driving every Saturday at great expense and great personal time to Dr. Simon's office in Boston, where they underwent separate hypnosis sessions with amnesia imposed at the end of each session. That was done for 2 reasons. The first reason was the intensity of the emotion released during these sessions was so great, Dr. Simon wanted to protect them from the further emotional harm, from the increased trauma that could have resulted from remembering these traumatic events. Also, he wanted to prevent them from discussing with each other what had been revealed from this period of amnesia, so that they couldn't contaminate the evidence one to the other. And that was very important in this case as far as investigating this case was concerned.
You know what? I think we're just going to leave it right there, because I feel like you've baited the hook, and then they can just go out and buy Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, and find out what was discovered. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea, and if they buy from Kathy or myself, they'll get both our autographs, too. You don't get that from Amazon, but you will get it from us. And
so would that be, is there a separate website for that? I mean, what the websites I was going to announce was stanfriedman.com or Kathleen-Mardon.com. Is it available on both of those sites, or is there a additional site just for the book?
No, both sites.
Okay. So, yeah, go to...
Stop shopping.
Go to either stantonfriedman.com or Kathleen-Mardon.com, and both of those are on the Just Energy website, Just Energy Radio website, and get an autographed copy by both authors of that book and find out all the inside details. I mean, because I don't think you could get much more inside short of having Betty or Barney write the book.
And they're not available to do that, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, that part too. Let's turn our attention to the new book, and it's entitled Science Was Wrong. So let's just set some groundwork of where we're going. What do you mean when you say science was wrong?
Well, as a professional scientist, I feel it's okay for me to say that some of my colleagues have done a great deal of damage to society over the years by making pronouncements about subjects which discouraged other people from doing the right thing and stood in the way of progress, using their position, if you will, as Dr. So-and-so, Professor So-and-so, to influence what was going on. You know, one thing you find out pretty quick in science and technology is you need money for research. But if the powers that be say, oh, that's a stupid idea, space travel is utter bilge, said the British Astronomer Royal a year before Sputnik, incidentally, all kinds of